Hello everyone. Welcome back. Today, we are going to talk about chapter 4, which is the equilibrium. So in this chapter, we will focus on the equilibrium where the demand curve and supply curve meet together endpoint. Okay, so we have studied demand curve, okay, which is the willingness of the consumers to pay at each price, and supply curve is willingness to buy, so willingness to sell the products at each price, right? So we are focusing on the commodity market still, and market outcomes are determined by forces of the supply and demand. Okay, um, so the equilibrium that we can draw the graph, so we can put the supply and demand curves on the graph together. Okay, so y-axis is still price, okay, and x-axis would be quantity in here, okay. So the supply curve is upward sloping, and demand curve is downward sloping, right? So demand curve, it looks like this, and supply curve in here, okay. So as you know that the supply curve is the marginal cost curve, okay. I just express it as MC, right? And what? The demand curve is the marginal benefit curve, okay. So in here is marginal benefit curve, okay. So the point at which these two curves meet is called equilibrium point. Okay? So I can express it as E. Okay, so this equilibrium point is the intersection of two curves. Okay, so this is the where the market price and market quantities are determined. Okay, so the price will be here. So I just express it P star. P star is the market price, and you can decide market quantity. So I can express it as Q star. Okay, so at this equilibrium point, we have the Q star and the P star. Okay, so in addition, the equilibrium point is where the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied become each. Okay, so this point is quantity demanded equal quantity supplied. Okay, it makes sense, right? The quantity demanded is from the demand curve, right? And the quantity supplied is from the supply curve. Okay, so at this point, anyway, this point is where the supply and demand curve meet together. So for quantities, we can realize that quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied. Okay, makes sense? Okay, so anyway, so this equilibrium point is the point that both consumers and suppliers are satisfied with each other. And as we know that rational law is the marginal benefit is equal to marginal cost is equal to price. Okay, look at this graph. Look at this graph. At the equilibrium point, what happened? The supply curve is marginal cost, right? And the demand curve is marginal benefit, right? So equilibrium point, we can realize that marginal cost equal to marginal benefit. And this point is equal to price, right? So that point is the in line with the relational rule. Okay, so we can realize that y relational rule is marginal benefits equal marginal cost equal to price. Okay, does it make sense? So I will give you an example of the market for gas. So if the price is $3, we assume that the quantity demand is 2 and the quantity supply is also 2. Then at $3, so we have 2 and 2. Okay? So QD is the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied. Okay? So each one is 2. Okay? So what is the differences between quantity demanded and quantity supplied? 2 minus 2, right? So we have 0. Okay? So in this case, it is an equilibrium point. Okay? As you know that in equilibrium point, the quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied, right? And $3 will be what? Market price, which is a P star. Okay. So on the graph, I can show it. Y-axis is price, and x-axis will be quantity. Okay. So supply curve is upward sloping. Demand curve is downward sloping. Okay. And what is the equilibrium point? Here, where the what? Demand and supply is equal to each other. Okay. So in this case, in this point, we have the market price at $3, and we have quantity is 2.0. Okay. Is it clear? So if the price increases to the $4, what happens? So if the price goes up, the quantity demanded will be reduced by low demand, and the quantity supplied will be increased by lower supply, right? So if you say that the quantity demanded is 1.6 and the quantity supplied is 2.5, the differences between two of them is 2.5 minus 1.6, it will be 1.9, right? So let's draw the graph here. And 1.6 is from the quantity demanded. It would be from the demand curve. So in here, this point is 1.6. Okay. And what? Quantity supply is from the supply curve. And here is a 2.5. Okay. So 1.6 is quantity demanded, 2.5 is quantity supply. Okay. So at $4, what happens? We have surplus. Okay. Why? Because the suppliers wants to sell the items at $4, right? But there's no demand for it. Okay, so the items is left over. So it is a surplus. Okay, and so what happened at the $2? Okay, that is the decreased price. So if we say that the quantity demanded is 2.4 and quantity supplied is 1.5. So differences between quantity supply and the quantity demanded is 1.5 minus 2.4. We have minus 1.9. Okay, so let's put this point on the graph. And 1.5 would be here. Okay, 1.5 is quantity supply. This point is from the supply curve. And 1.4 is in here. It is from the demand curve. So 2.4, sorry, 2.4. So what happened? In this case, at $2, okay, we have shortage. Okay. Why? Because buyers wants to buy at $2, but the sellers don't want to make things for $2. Okay, so this is why we have a shortage at $2. Okay, so in order to summarize it, 1.9, what is that? It is surplus, okay, and minus 1.9 is shortage. Okay, so in sum, surplus is happened quantity supplied if the quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. Okay, so in this case, market price is above the equilibrium point. Okay, does it make sense? Because this point, let's look at this point. Okay, so $3 is market equilibrium point, but the $4 is above the market equilibrium price. Okay, how about shortage? Shortage happens, quantity supplied is less than quantity demanded. So in this case, price is below equilibrium point. Okay, what happens to shortage? The price is below the equilibrium point. Okay, $2 is below the equilibrium point. Okay, so we have a shortage. What happened at equilibrium point? At equilibrium point, we have quantity supply is equal to quantity demanded. Okay, so at this point, we have equilibrium point. We can express as E. Okay, any questions about this? Okay, next we will study predicting the market changes. So first, let's see what happens when the demand curve shifts. Okay, so at first we will see the shift in the demand curve. After that, we will see the shift in the supply curve. Okay, so at first we will see the demand curve shift and demand curve. Okay, so let's draw the graph. Demand curve is downward sloping. Supply curve is upward sloping. Okay, and here is the equilibrium point. Okay, so as you know that in equilibrium point we have the market price. So if we think about market for gas, so we have $3 as a market price, and 2 is the market quantity, right? So if we have increased the demand in this case, what happens? Demand curve will shift to the right? So in this case, so if the other factors beside the price changes, right? So demand curve shifts to the right. So the price and the quantities will increase. Why? So if we have increased demand curve, okay, here's the increase demand curve, we have the new equilibrium point at here, right? So what happens? We have increased price. At the same time, we have increased the quantity. Okay, increase in price and increase in quantity. Okay, make sense? So when other factors besides the price changes and the demand curve shift to the left, right, then means that demand decreases. So the price and the quantities will decrease in this case. So what happens? I will draw the graph. Here is a supply curve. And in here, we have demand curve. Okay. And this point is equilibrium point. Okay. So if we have a decreased demand curve will shift to the left. Okay. We have new demand curve. At the same time, we have a new equilibrium point. Okay. So what happened compared to the original equilibrium point? We have decreased in price, right? And we have decrease in quantity. Okay. So what happens if the price curve changes? Um, so as the supply increases, the supply curve shifts to the right, right? And the price goes down and price what? Sorry, the quantities goes up, right? So if the supply increases, so there will be more things to sell and less value, right? So anyway, we have a supply curve and demand curve in here. Okay, in here is equilibrium point, right? So if we have a decreased supply, so if we have increased supply, the supply curve will shift to the right. Okay. So what happens? We have new equilibrium point in here. So compare the old equilibrium point to the new equilibrium point. What happens? In this case, we have decreased in price. At the same time, we have increased in quantity. Okay, right? So if the supply increases, there will be more things to sell and less value. If, for example, if too much grain was harvested that year, the price of the grains would goes down, right? So if we have decreased supply, and demand, here is the equilibrium point, right? So supply curve will shift to left. Okay, and this at the same time we have a new equilibrium point here. So compare the old equilibrium point to the new equilibrium point. Okay, what happened? we have increased increase in price. Same time, we have decrease in quantity. Okay? That is a supply shift in the supply curve. So when you put together the demand curve and supply curve, so you can predict how market will respond to the economies. Okay, just like this. Okay, now let's take a look at the examples using a PowerPoint. The first example is the major retailer announces plans to install the charging stations for electronic cars in 400 parking spaces in 120 cities. Okay, so how this will affect the demand for electronic cars? We can expect that we have increased demand for electronic cars, right? So what happens? That because the demand will shift to the what? Right, because of increased demand. So in this case, where is the new equilibrium point? Could be here, right? So let's compare the old equilibrium with the new equilibrium point. What happens? We have increased price, increased in price, and same time we have increased in quantity, right, of electronic cars, correct? And next question is that Amazon announced that it is developing technologies to deliver order to consumers within the 30 minutes. Okay, so as you know that developing technologies can affect your productivity, right? So your productivities can decrease your marginal cost. Okay, so what happens? So many consumers would like to use the Amazon's delivery service. Okay, but on the other hand, if there is a local brick and mortar stores, which is a local store, okay, so they want to know how this will affect their company sales. So we can expect that their demand will decrease due to the developing technology of Amazon, right? So what happens? Okay, in this case, the demand curve will shift to left, right? So we have equilibrium point in here. Okay, so if we compare the equilibrium point with the old one, what happens? We have decrease in price. At the same time, we have decrease in quantity. Okay, does make sense? Sorry. Next example is the federal government announced a plan to fund research that will eventually lower the cost of a battery used in hybrid cars, right? The head of the hybrid vehicle division at GM wants to know how these innovations will affect the hybrid car market. Okay, so in this case, we can expect that new technologies can decrease the marginal cost, so their supply of GMs will increase. So supply curve will shift to right, because of increased supply, right? So supply curve will shift to right, and equilibrium point in here. So let's compare the equilibrium point with the old one. What happened? They have decreased in price. At the same time, they have increased in quantity, right? Next example is, due to the drought in California, farmers face the rising cost for water. Okay, but farmers is farming the almond, but almond is what? Water intensive processes. So how will the drought affect the market for almond? Right? So we can expect that due to the drought, the supply of almond will decrease. Okay, so After that, we have decreased the supply of the almond. The supply curve of the almond will shift to left, right? So we have equivalent point in here. Okay, so we can compare the inequivalent point with a new equivalent point. So we have increased in price. At the same time, what? Decreased in quantity, okay, of almond. Okay, so these are examples of shifting the demand and the supply curve. Okay, so far we will look at the cases where the two curves move separately. So if the supply curve and demand curve move at the same time, what happens? Okay, so let's take a look at the example. So if the United States, U.S. economy goes into the recessions, okay, economy enter a severe, in this case, enter a severe recession. Okay, right? So what happened? Um, so due to the recessions, the wages of consumers who consume the gas will decrease, and the demand for gas will decrease. Okay, so in this case, reduce the income of consumers, gas consumers. So it leads to decrease in demand of gas. Okay. So at the same time, if the price of the crude oil increases dramatically, and the cost that gas oil suppliers have to pay increase, so the supply of the gas decreases, right? So the price of crude oil rose sharply. Okay, so in this case, it raises the cost for gasoline suppliers, right? So in this case, decrease in supply of gas. Okay, so if we have a decrease in demand curve will shift to left, right? Or at the same time, if we have a decrease in supply curve will shift to left also, right? So what happened in this case on the graph? Okay, the first case is when demand changes are large and the supply changes are relatively small. So what happens? Okay, so we have the supply curve in here and demand curve in here. Okay, we can have equivalent point where the demand curve and supply curve meet together. And anyway, we have a small decrease in supply. Okay, small decrease in supply, right? At the same times, we have a big decrease in demand. Big decrease in demand. Okay, so where is the new equilibrium point? I just let A, right? First A, we have a small decrease in supply. The supply curve should go left, right? After that, we have a big decrease to demand. So demand curve should go left, right? And at the same time, we have a new equilibrium point at here. I'll just let us see. Okay. So if we compare the new equilibrium point to the old equilibrium point, what happens? We have a decrease in price, right? D. We have a decrease in price. At the same time, what? We have decreased in quantity, right? Okay, so second case is when the demand changes are small and the supply changes are relatively large. Okay, so what happens comparing to the previous case? Um, anyway, we have supply curve in here, and we have demand curve in here, and here's equilibrium point, right? So, if we have small demand shift, in this case, demand curve will shift to left. Okay, so just let the A. Here's a new demand curve. Okay, so just let the A. What? Small decrease in demand. Small decrease in demand. Okay, and at the same time, we have a big supply shift. Supply shift, right? So supply curve will shift to left a large amount. So here, supply curve will shift to left. So just B, we have big decrease in supply. Big decrease in supply. Right? Are you with me? Okay. So, where is the new equilibrium point? New equilibrium point would be here. Okay. So compare the old equilibrium point to the new equilibrium point. What happens? We can realize that we have increase in price. At the same time, what? We have decrease in quantity. Correct? So we have a different result between case 1 and case 2. Okay, therefore, this can be varied depending on how much demand and supply curve shift. Okay, so that's why we cannot decide the result value, and it's ambiguous. Okay, so that's all the chapter 4, which is equilibrium points. So next time we will study chapter 5. Okay, thank you.